think back to some of the football games I went to in college, having a 100 ml in a boot or something. I don't know if it was the first whiskey I tried, but it's been about the last.
I was around the distillery as a kid. My grandfather was the master distiller here for many years. He retired when I was about 8 years old. So when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, a lot of times I was up here with him, running around and trying to catch the ducks up at the cave spring or playing on the fire engines and things like that. Jack Daniel's was always a place that was interesting. It was more interesting because I got to spend time with my grandfather here. And he's still around, he's 88. And to be able to call him up and have 30+ years of distilling experience a phone call away is pretty invaluable.
Dad worked here over 40 years. Once I got down here and got to work here for probably 10 or 11 years, I got the opportunity to work with my dad. He sort of showed me the ropes and things that he had learned over the past 35 or 40 years, which was pretty neat.
My grandmother worked there in through the 80s, and my dad worked here for 35 years. My dad also was a preacher, so he was a preacher for 35 years. If someone called the house and they asked for Tinky, that was his nickname here, you knew it was a Jack Daniel work call. And if they called for Brother Wayne, they were looking for the preacher.
Most of the master distillers before me grew up in this area, in the shadows of the distillery, were either related to Jack or, grew up in this community. And I didn't, but I got here, about as quickly as I could. When you come to Lynchburg, you kind of get a sense it's a singular focused town. It's like we are a whiskey making town, and that's what it is, and that's what we do. When I came to Jack Daniel's, I didn't necessarily set my sights on being the next master distiller. I didn't know that if that would even be a possibility for me. But I just looked at what is the next logical thing in front of me, and I'll work towards it.
Jeff, he's just so approachable. His door is literally always open, and there's really no formality with him. If you have an idea or a thought or a problem, you can just walk in the morning with a cup of coffee and bounce it off of him, and you'll get an honest opinion back. That's pretty refreshing. I don't know that everybody gets so lucky to have a boss to where you really could feel like you can stroll in any moment very casually and have any conversation needed. We've got barrels moving into 114, hopefully tomorrow.
Yep.
So I'll go see how many we have and what lot, and then see.
Okay. Are we gonna be able to get 2 lots in there?
We will, but it'll be a few weeks before the second lot will be available because
Okay.
it'll have to be.
How do they feel about 3 lots? I know that's.
I don't think it was their favorite, but I think they're coming around to the idea.
Okay. I grew up in Jackson. My mother was a school teacher. My father was a railroad worker. I went away to college thinking I would work in the automotive field. I think from the time I got a set of keys when I was 16, I was kind of in love, and I still love cars. But when I got out of college, it was a terrible time to be looking for work in the automotive industry. I lived in Slidell, Louisiana, made coffee for about 4.5 years. That was where I was first exposed to the sensory sciences. After a couple of years in Texas, I had an opportunity to come back to Tennessee. And I knew when I got back to Tennessee that I didn't want to leave again. I was going to do the best I could, but to stay close to home. It's where my family is, and it's always been home, even when I was in another state. Jordan Ennis is going to come here tomorrow. This is for ALS. His father, Steve Ennis, passed away with ALS.
I did not know that.
Okay, he's going to pick up a barrel head. A barrel head that Kevin has custom done for him. but also needs a branded barrel.
Okay.
And I don't know, is it best to pick it up here, or do you want him to go to Craig Street?
No, you can get it here.
Get it here? All right, when I get the barrel head, it's supposed to be at the guard shack later today. I'm gonna sign it and just bring it here, and I'll send him here tomorrow.
Okay.
So
on
that'll
the
work.
on the barrel, is it a finished branded barrel? Or
Yes, our typical donation barrel.
Okay.
Which I've just signed about 8 of them.
All right.
Over at Craig Street, so they should be sitting on some. That's why I was saying I can send him there if you prefer.
No, his will be fine.
All right, let's do that then.
That'll work.
Very good. I knew from the first day that I interviewed here, I came and spent a few hours, that I was like, I so hope. I mean, I was fingers crossed. I knew there would be stiff competition for the job, but they needed a quality control manager. And I had enough quality in my background with enough well-known brands that they felt confident in me that I could do it. And so that's where I started, and that was 16 years ago. It's become the best decision of my life. Well, when I first got here, Jack Daniel's was, I would have described it, kind of sleepy. Brown spirits, whiskeys were very popular through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They began to cool off a little bit in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Vodka kind of became preferred drink in the category that was most growing. Jack Daniel's really kind of bucked the trend through that 3-decade period. We were growing when really very few were. You know, Jack Daniel's is an iconic American brand. In an industry where there is a lot of smoke and mirrors, I'd be the first to tell you that not every brand is really who they project themselves to be. Jack Daniel's is. It makes it easy for me to stand up on a stage and look people in the eye and talk about who we are. I would struggle to do that with other brands in our industry today.
It's in this really interesting space to me. It's a very accessible thing. You know, it's Jack, but it's also a high quality product. And usually a very high quality product is not accessible. It's elitist. And Jack Daniel's is like the best for every man or woman. And that's a rare space to hold.
For Jack Daniel's, we have not necessarily been some brand that's been known to put out a lot of little things in small quantities. That was not who we were. That was really not what people wanted from us, it seemed. They wanted consistency. They wanted to know that they could go in any bar in the world and find a bottle of Jack Daniel's and it be the same. To me, that is what has defined our craft. Yeast is one of the things in whiskey making that often doesn't get talked about these days because very few people have proprietary cultures. Only your oldest whiskey distillers would do what we do and have a culture that's been harvested and been kept over years and, you know, generations. We can date this one back to Prohibition. It was kept as a big, very diverse jug yeast. Over the years, we have gone through and selected out of it and gotten rid of all the sort of noise in it to purify the culture. But now it's all about maintaining it, making sure that it stays clean. That's, you know, Kevin's primary focus is making sure that we have a healthy yeast culture because this will ultimately protect our character. When people ask me, well, how do you know that Jack Daniel's today tastes like what it did 10 or 20 years ago, and how do you know it's going to taste the same 10 or 20 years from now? One of the main things that would change us is this. that's why we're so protective of it. But this is pretty important. And like I said, Kevin's the best.
Thanks. The success that we've had has enabled us to reinvest into our process and still make whiskey the same way that my grandfather made it in 1957. Charcoal mellowed, 10 feet of charcoal, the same yeast strain, the same care of making our own barrels, all of these things that are really unmatched in the industry. There's really nobody else controlling the quality of their whiskey the way we control the quality of our whiskey, and that's known. Old Number 7 better taste the same as it did when my grandfather was making it, right? Because if not, I'll find out about it if I go visit him.
Distillery is measuring all the right things, checking them early, setting up to win next week, today, so that we're not going to be surprised by what happens. You sense a little bit of the blood, sweat, and tears of a community in every bottle. That this is not just about the liquid. It is about the passion and the love of a community that underlies it. Pretty archaic, but it's non-sparking. So if I need a lot of barrel sample, I can send in a crew here with some pretty, high quality equipment that won't be a fire risk, but this works and it doesn't have any open brushes or sparks that would come off of it, so it would be considered a safe tool. I use a stainless steel bit. Hear it breathe? Barrel's still carrying the heat of the summer on it, so whiskey is expansive in nature, so the whiskey was pushed down into the barrel, so that actually alleviated some of the pressure on the barrel right there. We should get a nice flow of whiskey out of it here. Okay. Get my bottle ready here. Really nice nose on it. A lot of depth. This barrel's, it goes in at 125 proof, but by the time it's been here 5 or 6 years, as this barrel has in this location, it would be more typical that the proof has risen to probably around 133 in that ballpark. So considering the full strength nature of this particular product, it's really good. Really nice. I would say that this is mature. We may not choose to bottle it anytime soon, but I would put it on a list of available barrels. If we need to consider it, to me, it's certainly ready to go.
Every drop of Jack Daniel's, every single drop is made in Lynchburg, Tennessee. There's no other plant, there's no other factory. Lynchburg is a whiskey-making town. There's no Walmart there, there's no Cineplex. There's no USA Today box on the square. So they don't have anything to distract them. They're all about making whiskey. And if Jeff didn't tell you, I'll tell you, that's probably the greatest form of quality control, are the people. The people who've been making it for generations, and they want to leave that job they've loved for a son or a daughter, or a niece or a nephew.
If you go back in our history, prior to Prohibition, the primary form of American whiskey was rye whiskey. I call it frontier whiskey. It had different attributes. It was a little bit more rough and ragged, if you will. Now, a lot of that has to do with the pepper and spice that kind of follows rye. Throw it back and clench your teeth and hang on and swallow it. And if you got a snake bite, you could clean it with it. It was sort of that style of whiskey.
So if you think of it kind of like cooking, and you cook a dish and you put way too much pepper in the dish and it tastes like pepper. That's kind of the way we approach rye whiskey. Our grain bill is 70% rye, 12% malted barley, and 18% corn. So we have a lot of rye character there at 70%, but not overwhelmingly so. There's still some of those natural sweet tones that people know Jack Daniel's to be. We wanted to create something that really stood out and made a statement with the spicy, earthy, pungent flavors of rye, but to also balance that with the traditional notes of Jack Daniel's. Have that nod to the past and in our heritage and our tradition of whiskey making here.
We're not first into the rye category for sure, but it gave us a chance to think through who we wanted to be when we got there. It gave us some time to plan and think long and hard about it, and I think we've come up with the right decision. I think there's something familiar about it. It's made by us at the distillery in Lynchburg. It has the same yeast culture. It has the same barrel behind it. So I think there's some things that are maybe some commonalities that you would define in the product, but the character is so different that I think for a lot of people who are not necessarily Jack Daniel's fans, we're hoping that we can change their minds. That's always, what you hope to get when you put out any new product is that you cast a bigger net, that you become appealing to a larger group of people. We've done honey, we've done fire, we've done single barrel, we've done gentleman Jack. So this is just one more opportunity for us to find a product that will ring people's bell, hopefully, and taste like what they want it to taste like. I'm nowhere near as nervous about the rye launch as I was about the honey. This really kind of speaks to hardcore craftsmanship and the art. It's charcoal mellowed, it's made by us, only the finest grains coming from a barrel we've manufactured, so all these things are in our favor when it comes to knowing that we can count on the quality of the product.
Jack Daniel's Tennessee Rye, it is significant. We've been on the same grain bill for generations. A predominantly corn Tennessee whiskey. That's what Jack Daniel's is known for around the world, and that's what they continue to make. And so for many years, the strength of a master distiller was, don't mess that up. Continue to make this high quality product in the way that it's always been made. Well, Jack Daniel's Tennessee Rye allows the distillers to show people or remind them. People may have forgotten what a great product Jack Daniel's already is, but Jack Daniel's Tennessee Rye gives the distillers an opportunity to show their talents once again, and for people to have a renewed appreciation of what Jack Daniel's has been doing for many, many years.
All right, has everybody got a glass in their hand of it that wants one? Kind of knows this one right quick. To me, there's something familiar about this, even though the flavor is going to be very different. There's something familiar about this rye. Maybe it's the yeast culture, or maybe it's the fact that it's coming from the same barrel that we've handcrafted for ourselves for years now, for decades. We've been making barrels. Maybe the fact that that's common on this, that really all we're changing here is the grain bill. There's something about it that says, hey, I think this is Jack Daniel's, even though it's going to be different. But I hope you guys enjoy it. Where I describe this as being sweet to oaky on that first glass, sweet's on the tip of the tongue, oaks in the back of the throat. Notice this one has a lot of mid-palate character, and it tends to be very peppery and spicy in character. A lot of in-mouth flavor. So hope you guys enjoy it. Jack Daniel's Tennessee Rye. Thank you guys for coming. Like I said, the numbers were good when I got here, so I don't take credit for how great Jack Daniel's was when I got here, but I haven't screwed it up. which is good. None of us have screwed it up, and nobody wants to be a part of the generation that would have screwed it up. It's not just about a job for your lifetime, it's about stewardship. You know, this is a job that you hope to pass down to the next generation, whether it be your children or nieces and nephews.
He doesn't consider this a job. This is basically our life, and that's his life. That's the way I feel, and that's the way, you know, a lot of people that work at Jack Daniel's, it's more than a job. It's something a lot bigger than the individual, and I think Jeff realizes that.
You know, Jack is no longer here. He founded the brand. He had those principles, but I think it's just as alive today as it was when he passed away in 1911. There's a saying on the wall when you go to Jack's old office is, every day you make it the best you can. And I think some people look at that as sort of a statement that you don't need to change anything. Don't compromise what we have set out to do here. That's kind of implied in that. But if you can make it better tomorrow, you should try. Each new generation has adopted the pride and the mission that every day you make it the best you can. You don't compromise, you don't mess it up.